he hadn't deviated and just staggered that 90 seconds more, we'd be telling a different story, and he'd be on television highlighting the dangers of walking in extremely hot temperatures.
Foul play has been ruled out in relation to the death of the TV doctor Michael Mosley. Police in Greece say he died at around 4 p.m. on Wednesday. That's not long after CCTV footage appeared to show him falling close to where his body was found on the island of Symi. Police sources say there's no sign of criminal activity or an injury that caused his death. We can talk to Chief News Correspondent for The Times, David Brown, who's live there on the island. Hello to you, David.
Afternoon, John, here from this beautiful Greek island of Symi, where Dr. Mosley disappeared on Wednesday of last week.
Yeah, it's a beautiful setting for such a sad story, David. And the cause of death, what are they saying there?
They're saying it's natural causes. I think significantly, we've only had the initial results of the coroner's examination, and he has said that the way Dr. Mosley was found, he was in a sitting position. He appeared to have sat down when he died. There was no indication of him falling or striking his head. I was part of a small group of people who discovered the body yesterday, and harrowing circumstances, and I don't want to go into details, but he was in a position where a person with medical knowledge would have positioned themselves if they felt that they'd perhaps overcome by heat, feeling faint, with his feet raised. He was peacefully positioned, and I think this shows that at the time that he died, he was so close to safety. I've walked it this morning. He was 90 seconds away from the Aegean Sea. He'd clearly become slightly disorientated. The video I've watched of the security camera footage, where he's a pretty indistinct figure, shows him zigzagging backwards and forwards along a perimeter fence, and he couldn't see the small gates that would have been in front of him, and that took 5 minutes. And then he walked down the path, which is marked with red and blue paint, and then I think he realised that he was becoming seriously unwell, and he veered off. And there's a little trickle from an underground spring, and he sat there, put himself in a position, the best position, to try to recover. And unfortunately, he wasn't. That didn't happen. If he could have walked for another 90 seconds, he would have made it to the sea. That's the awful thing about the death of this much loved man.
That is such a terribly sad aspect of the story. And I ask this not in any spirit of recrimination, but the search for this man, is it thought to have done all that could have been done to find him as soon as he might have been found?
I feel very guilty about this, John, because on Saturday I went to the resort. I suspected it might have been a place he was going to. I looked around. I saw Dr. Mosley's 4 children and other friends walk past, retracing his route. I saw a search team over by a place called the Abyss, where there's a network of caves and hidden tunnels. And I walked towards it, and I realised I couldn't see the search team. So just as I got to the fence, I walked back to get a better view. If I'd have taken 2 more steps forward and looked to the left, I might have seen Dr. Mosley a day earlier than I did when I found him on Sunday. So it's a barren place. It's rocky. The heat was ferocious. I spoke to some of the rescuers, the search team, who were there on Saturday, who didn't see him, and they described to me about how difficult it was. So I think it's easy to pass blame, but I will blame myself as well if that's the case. It's a hostile terrain, John.
I mean, I really do not believe you need to blame yourself in the way that you're telling me you do, David. I mean, tell us about this man, Dr. Mosley. I mean, many will need no background on such a well-known and well-loved character, but for the rest, he was a man with a great profile in public, and he held in such great affection. Just tell us a little bit more about him.
Yeah, well, what's extraordinary, John, of course, I'm on this Greek island where there's people from around the world. And I knew he was an immense figure in Britain for his medical shows, the way he carried out medical experiments on his own body, the way he made medicine and science accessible, the books that have been read by millions of people. What I didn't realise was it's how popular he was around the world, with, because I'm a journalist, people coming up and asking me questions about what had happened, telling me how much they loved him. There is this real sense of international loss on this small Greek island.
Mm.
It is a beautiful place. It is an absolute tragedy uh, what happened to Dr. Mosley. But as his wife has said, Dr. Claire Bailey Mosley, he almost reached his goal. She herself has praised the rescuers for their efforts. She's highlighted the fact that it was in a difficult place to spot. It is just one of, I think, one of those awful, awful tragedies. If you could have found the gate and not spent 5 minutes walking around in that heat above 40 degrees, perhaps if he'd have taken more water, I think from the timings, my analysis is he probably got lost on this mountain path. It took him twice as long to reach this resort as would have been expected. If he hadn't deviated and just staggered that 90 seconds more, we'd be telling a different story and he'd be on television highlighting the dangers of walking in extremely hot temperatures.
Yes, I suppose David, the sort of the permutations are infinite of what might have happened had this happened. This would not be the situation, or that
Yep.
happened. But we say that now, and in a sense, there's little points in it. Although I imagine on the island, I'm getting a really clear sense from you, David, on the impact this would have had on people there. It's all I'm sure people are talking about in every bar, in every cafe.
It is, and for the locals as much as the tourists. I mean, there is puzzlement that a visitor, I know he'd visited here 8 years before, would take this mountain path. As I say, temperatures above 40 degrees. And it is a tough walk. Now, Dr. Mosley would know his body and his physical capabilities better than almost anybody else because of his expertise, his medical background. He's an extremely fit man. He genuinely believed he could have got there. But what the search teams were telling me at the end of last week is if you miss this path, which is only marked by blobs of red and blue paint on rocks, it's very difficult to get back on it. It all looks the same up there. It's rocks, the occasional bush. If you get lost, to get back onto that path, to find those blobs of red and blue paint probably took him about 45 minutes. And he probably wasn't expecting that.
All right, David Brown, thank you for joining us. It is good to get your perspective and your take on what has happened there. Speaking to us live from the island of Simi.